Hi, ArcfieldWeather.com meteorologist Paul Dorian here on Monday morning, November the 20th. A lot to talk about this morning. I'd like to revisit El Nino and take a look at the latest with respect to the El Nino event, the warmer than normal sea surface temperatures out across the tropical Pacific Ocean. Certainly El Nino will have a big impact on the winter season across the nation, and we have some interesting updates here with respect to the temperature pattern over just the last several days. Overall, we have a very active weather pattern across the nation. The cold shot that I expected to travel from northwest to southeast across the nation this week just will not happen. That certainly turned out to be a bad forecast. We get into a colder and colder weather pattern across much of the nation later this weekend into the early part of next week, and we'll kind of discuss some of the reasons as to why I think that cold shot across the nation did not materialize. We do have a soaking rain event coming to the Mid-Atlantic region from later tomorrow into tomorrow night, much of the northeast U.S., in areas where there has not been soaking rain in several weeks. Places like D.C., Philadelphia, New York City should get more than an inch of rain out of this system, again, from later tomorrow into tomorrow night and early Wednesday morning. Now, looks like it'll be cold enough at the onset for higher elevation locations in the interior part of the northern mid-Atlantic, the northeast U.S., to get some ice or snow at the onset, maybe even accumulating snow across higher elevation areas of interior New England, for example. But anywhere from, let's say, the Poconos to north central PA to the Catskills can start off with a period of snow or sleet tomorrow. And again, farther to the north, interior of Vermont, New Hampshire, and certainly Maine can get some accumulating snow out of this system later tomorrow into tomorrow night. Let's first start off here by looking at the latest with respect to El Nino. Now, a couple of things I want to point out that in our winter outlook, which you can find at arcfieldweather.com, just go to the upper right and go to the seasonal outlooks and take a look at that menu, and you'll see the winter outlook. Certainly we emphasize El Nino will play a big role in the winter season, and we also pointed out that believe this will not turn out to be a strong El Nino, nothing at all like the 2015-2016 El Nino or the 97, 98, 82, 83 El Ninos, but rather just a moderate strength El Nino that looks like it will weaken during the second half, or during much of the winter season. It'll end up being in a weakening phase. Also, thought this would be kind of a hybrid type of El Nino event with what we call an eastern-based El Nino up front, and then that would shift to a central-based El Nino. And by that I mean the warmest temperatures, the warmest sea surface temperatures relative to normal will end up being out over the central part of the Pacific Ocean. Indeed, it looks like that shift from the eastern base to the central base is already taking shape. And that's important because a central-based El Nino is more conducive to colder, snowier winter weather pattern across the southern states, the eastern states, and that is what I continue to expect to happen for the 23-24 winter season. Now, one of the ways that we track the temperature pattern out in the Pacific Ocean, the tropical Pacific Ocean, is by separating the equator into different regions here. What we have here is the equator right here, the 0-degree latitude line cutting across right here. This gray area represents South America, the west coast of South America. This particular region, which we call 1+2, is where the eastern-based El Nino would take place right here, whereas we have a region 3, a region 4, and this mesh region right here, the kind of a combination of 3 and 4 is what we call 3.4 region. And this is out in the central part of the Pacific Ocean. And again, expect that the warmest temperatures relative to normal will be shifting from the eastern-based region of the Pacific to more of a central base. Again, more favorable for colder, snowier weather pattern into the eastern part of the U.S. Now, let's now take a look at some of the temperature changes just over the past several days. And here is that region, 3.4. This is the central part of the Pacific Ocean. And these two temperature plots that we'll show here come from tropicaltidbits.com. And we're on a timeline going in this direction here with the latest time right here. And take a look at this jump in the temperatures, again, relative to normal. These are the anomalies right here. This is the neutral line cutting across right here. So anything above is kind of an El Nino or warmer than normal sea surface temperature. Again, we're looking at that central part of the Pacific Ocean right now. Temperatures are shooting up in those last several days to all the way up to 1.6 degrees above normal. Now, let's compare that with the east-based region. And here we go. This is the 1+2, that region just off the west coast of South America. Temperatures are coming down. They're still above normal, but they're coming down relative to normal, now down to 1.0 above normal here. So we have this in the central part of the Pacific Ocean. This trend in the eastern part certainly appears as if it is shifting now from more of an eastern base to a central based El Nino event. And again, that is more conducive, more favorable for a colder, snowier weather pattern in the eastern part of the nation, even the southern part of the nation. If you have a strong El Nino in the eastern part of the Pacific Ocean, that often overwhelms the eastern states with a warm winter. It does not appear that that will take place. Now, one last map I want to show here with respect to El Nino, and then we'll take a look at the active weather pattern across the continental U.S. This is called the MEI, or multivariate ENSO indicator here, and because it's labeled as multivariate, it does indeed include in its calculation many parameters, not just the sea surface temperatures, but also the pressure out in the Pacific Ocean, the winds out in the Pacific Ocean, and what we call the outgoing long wave radiation. Basically, it gives you some information about the amount of sunshine versus clouds out in that part of the nation. So it's out in the world, the tropical Pacific Ocean. So it's really showing us the atmospheric response to what's going on with respect to that temperature pattern in the tropical Pacific Ocean. And you can compare this particular year right here, what we are experiencing right now, and it is relatively weak compared to all these other El Ninos. And again, these were strong El Nino events: 15, 16, 97, 98, and 91, 92. 86, 87, and this was one of the granddaddy of them all, 82, 83 El Nino. Compared to all those, we are seeing a relatively weak atmospheric response. Again, this takes into consideration multiple parameters such as the pressures and the winds and that outgoing long wave radiation. So this is telling us that this does not appear that this will end up being a strong El Nino. And again, a moderate El Nino or a weakening El Nino that's out in the central-based Pacific, out in the central area in terms of the greatest temperature anomalies, all are more favorable for a colder, snowier winter in the eastern and southern states here. So this is, again, something we'll monitor over the next few weeks, but a confirmation that is not going to turn into any kind of a super strong El Nino event. It does not appear that it'll end up being focused over the eastern Pacific, but more the central Pacific Ocean. Well, let's get back to North America and then the continental U.S. with respect to the weather pattern that's going on. A very active weather pattern. You can see just starting off here, we're looking at the 500 millibar height anomaly pattern over North America as we begin the new work week here, as we begin the new day on Monday, November 20th. Lots of lows and highs all over the place. And this is making for more complicated forecasts, certainly more difficult for the models to handle. And last week we were talking about a very strong ridge popping up across the west coast of Canada and Alaska. I expected that to happen, and that would have contributed to an influx of colder than normal air into the U.S. from Canada and pushing from northwest to southeast. That is not materializing the way I expected it to happen. We'll take a look at what will evolve here, it looks like, over the next several days. Let's move forward here. Again, we do have some ridging out across Alaska. This is now tomorrow morning, but the overall wind flow by the middle of the week is not pushing that cold air from northwest Canada into the U.S. It's really only making its way all the way into the southern part of Canada by the middle of the week. I expected this to have been much more pronounced by midweek and allowing for that cold air to push all the way into the central U.S. Now let's move forward in time here. We'll see what happens here as we get to the weekend. Here's the Friday evening forecast map, and Saturday, and then all the way into the latter part of the weekend, Sunday, and finally all the way into Sunday night, Monday time frame. Here we are Monday morning. Now notice here we have more of a flow that comes all the way into the central states here as compared to the next couple of days. So this looks like it'll allow for some of that colder than normal air to really work its way into the U.S. from Canada later this weekend into the early part of next week, as opposed to the next few days, which is what I expected to see happen last week. That will not happen, but it is on the way, it looks like, for the weekend or the early part of next week in terms of that change to an overall colder weather pattern across the nation. Well, now let's take a look at the surface forecast maps. Again, we're using the 0Z run of the GFS, the conventional run of the GFS. You're starting off the day with very strong high pressure moving into the southeastern part of Canada, and low pressure that was out of the eastern Pacific Ocean last week moved across the western U.S. and now setting up over the central states, and that will become a strong storm system by the time we get to tomorrow afternoon out over the Great Lakes region, the upper part of the Midwest. And the difference in pressure between this strong high pressure over southeastern Maine at this time, midday Tuesday, and this intensifying storm over the upper Midwest features a kind of a tightening pressure gradient. The winds will become much more of a factor. Now, at the onset, midday tomorrow, maybe cold enough upstate PA, and certainly will go a little bit farther in time. Interior, higher elevation locations of New England can see some snow and ice, or even accumulating snow across portions of New England by late tomorrow night. Meanwhile, down on the warmer side of the storm system, and it won't be warm, it'll be a chilly day tomorrow in DC, Philadelphia, New York City, and certainly can be some heavy rain at times. It's beneficial rainfall. We haven't had anything like this in several weeks in the Mid-Atlantic region, but again, 1 to 2 inches of rain is on the table in places like DC, Philadelphia, New York City, and certainly to the south and east of the I-95 corridor, kind of in line with this forecast map here. Has a good chance of 1 to 2 inches of rain out of this system, and the winds will become a factor as well. Probably the heaviest rain will fall tomorrow night in the big cities. DC, Philadelphia, New York City would throw out the possibility of a thunderstorm or two mixed in, and it pretty much winds down by the time we get to early Wednesday morning. Now, there will be kind of an attempt to develop another low pressure area on the backside of this initial storm system here down across the Carolina coastline during the midweek time frame. It is something that has to be watched. It probably pushes harmlessly out to sea, although it will cause some increase in winds across the Mid-Atlantic region later Wednesday night. Certainly something we'll have to follow. And then by the time we get to Thursday, maybe a breezy day, but a cool, dry Thanksgiving Day for much of the Mid-Atlantic region, the Northeast U.S. It may be slightly below normal, but not well below normal. I expected last week for this Thursday, but slightly below normal on the cool side, but dry. And then the weather turns more unsettled There's a possibility of a system here. The GFS is not showing it, but there's a possibility of another system to develop in the eastern states at the end of the work week, Friday, Saturday time frame. Something we'll monitor over the next few days. And then the pattern does turn colder, and at this particular time we have, this is the latter part of the upcoming weekend, we have certainly a colder weather pattern setting up across much of the central and eastern U.S. Again, that's later this weekend into the early part of next week. One final note, I didn't mention this, for the Eagles fans out there and the football fans, the Eagles have a rematch with the Chiefs tonight in Kansas City. Weather looks miserable, probably windy and cold with periods of rain out in Kansas City. Again, that's for tonight's rematch of the Super Bowl opponents, the Eagles and the Chiefs. So a very active weather pattern going on across the nation, and we'll continue to revisit El Nino over the next few weeks as we really start to get into the winter season of 2023-2024. That's it for now for ArcfieldWeather.com. This has been meteorologist Paul Dorian.